So, I have a question for you. How are romance, artificial intelligence, grandchildren, and cryptocurrency connected? Let's find out on today's program. Welcome, everyone, to Alaska Wisdom and Wellness. I'm Marty Lang.
And I'm Pat Branson.
And we're your hosts for the program. Alaska Wisdom and Wellness is a program designed especially for Alaskan elders and seniors, as well as those who are actively involved in their caregiving. As we grow older, there are often many questions and concerns that arise. Our goal is to address these issues and provide you with practical insights to make life easier. So whether you're listening in Ketchikan or Kaktovik, Utqiagvik or Unalaska, or somewhere in between, welcome to Alaska Wisdom and Wellness. Today on our program, we will explore the topic of elder fraud, a very important thing for seniors and elders to be aware of. We have two experts with us today. Both of our guests work for the state of Alaska in the Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development. Dawn Hanisch is the Division Operations Manager, and Ann Sivelich is the Chief of Securities for the Division of Banking and Securities. And they have some very interesting stories to tell. An Alaska-sized welcome to both of you. Ann, if you can start us off, give us just a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then Dawn as well.
Sure. Thanks, Marty and Pat, for having us on today. We're very excited to be here. I am the Chief of Securities for the Division of Banking and Securities. And so I've been with the division for a little over 10 years, and I am overseeing a staff that looks into broker-dealers, investment advisors, securities themselves. We regulate them, we license them, and then we also do investigations into them. And so that's how I became involved with elder fraud, is through investigations and our regulated entities reporting potential elder exploitation to our office.
And Dawn?
Well, I am the division operations manager. So basically anything that is operations or financial in the division are my wheelhouse. So anything from policies and procedures to, our budget for the year, and personnel stuff. And I mean, you name it. The director sometimes likes to call me the den mother. So, and then I've been with the division for 2 years today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Today we are talking about elder fraud. What exactly does elder fraud mean?
I have a few definitions and then I'll let Ann elaborate. So according to the National Elder Abuse Incident Study, elder fraud is the illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, property, or assets. And according to Alaska statute, that is also defined as robbery, extortion, theft, and exploitation of another person or of another person's resources for personal profit or advantages with no significant benefit occurring to the person who is exploited. So those are the technical definitions of elder fraud. And Ann, did you want to elaborate on that?
That's great, Dawn. I would say that, like Dawn's saying, there's a set definition, and then in every area of law, they probably have a definition that their area regulates. So, for example, in securities, we have a law that protects older and vulnerable adults from financial exploitation. And so we define covered adult within that as anyone who is 60 years of age or older, or a vulnerable adult. And a vulnerable adult is given the meaning a person 18 years of age or older who, because of physical or mental impairment, is unable to meet the person's own needs or to seek help without assistance. So kind of adding on to what Dawn said, there's specific definitions within each law, but we're overall talking about the financial exploitation of people 60 years or older or someone who is a vulnerable adult.
So thank you, Anne and Dawn, for that definition. And it was good to include the definition of the ages, which of 60 and older, as well as younger people as well, that we know that that kind of fraud does go on. Can you provide statistics on how elder financial fraud affects Alaskans?
Absolutely. Yes, Pat, thank you. The statistics are really alarming, I have to say. I have statistics for Alaska and I have statistics for our nation. And what they both reveal is that these crimes are not being reported. We look at the fact there's $28.3 billion with a B nationwide, which is stolen funds, and only 7.8 billion are actually reported to authorities nationwide. So that leaves more than $20 billion that's not being reported. And in Alaska alone, we have seen probably around $7 to $8 billion stolen from our vulnerable citizens, but only 319 victims came forward. So if you think about, there's hundreds and hundreds of others, maybe thousands of others who did not report these crimes. And the really sensitive part of these statistics is that only $8 billion or 28% of the nationwide average of fraud is done by a stranger. So if you look at that, that means there's $20 billion in our nation that is being stolen from our vulnerable citizens by family, friends, or caregivers.
Wow. That's awful.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming. Yeah.
My goodness.
Marty, if I can interject here, being a director of the senior citizens of Kodiak for 35 years, is that that's certainly what we as staff found, is that it was the family members who were doing the fraud. And very difficult situation to actually get enough information about. And then, of course, by state law, anyone involved in being a provider has to report that.
So, how can this type of fraud affect Alaska's elderly?
Well, considering that the elderly population makes up 21% of Alaska's population, and around 9% of those live under the poverty level. So we cannot afford to let this population continue to be victims of financial fraud and abuse. The most well-known schemes, I think we all could agree, are, you think of checking and savings accounts and investment accounts. Somebody calls you to give money or, your credit card information over the phone. And this is definitely going to leave our elderly population with nothing to live on in retirement, because we're seeing completely getting wiped out. Your investments, your retirement accounts, your savings. But we also have learned of Alaskan elderly losing their homes and other significant assets like their shareholders' rights in native corporations, which can be detrimental. Alaskan elderly really can't afford the high cost of living in Alaska, which we all see, many people struggling. But when they become fraud victims, it leaves the individual in a very dangerous place. And we are seeing a serious rise in suicide rates amongst our elderly population. I just recently read a report that was published in 2023, and it goes on to say that in 2021 and 2022, our nation's elderly had the highest suicide rate among all age groups. So that's including young people, 20s, 30s, all of those. So we are seeing a significant rise in our nation of suicide rates, and in Alaska, and also substance abuse. Our elderly are also made to depend on family members when these types of fraud occur. And this puts a whole nother strain on the next generation of families. I can say, personally, I'm super blessed to have my parents live with my family and I. And, we love having them here. But, I can tell you that it does put a little bit more pressure on my husband and I to make sure that we, have good jobs where we can provide for our household, and also to take care of their needs, and it does put a little strain on our finances.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think those statistics that you just gave us, Don, are really alarming. And the increase in elderly suicide rate is most alarming.
Yes, because we know that when fraud or abuse is committed against our vulnerable citizens, there's a lot of shame involved in that.
Right.
They're, first of all, they're embarrassed because they gave into it, and it was such a, once they're alerted to it and understand what happened, they just are so embarrassed and they don't want to tell their family members, because then what if their independence is taken from them?
Right.
Right. We want to show the utmost respect to our seniors. We want to help them to maintain that independence.
That is exactly right. And I've certainly heard and seen that those kind of cases happen within our own community where phone scams occur. The senior is embarrassed to tell anyone, and eventually it's found out. And of course, what you mentioned is shame and embarrassment and all
Yeah.
of that
And
happen.
hopefully it is found out, right? Hopefully
Hopefully
it
it is
is.
found out. But when it is found out,
Sometimes it goes unnoticed, and I can't even imagine how difficult a situation that would be for an individual.
right. And the kind of feeling that the senior has when that occurs. And the most important thing that you're saying, Dawn, and how that would affect seniors is they would be worried about their independence being taken away and not
Absolutely.
being competent. That
Yes.
would bring their antenna up in a lot of concern, as well as
Absolutely.
those people who found out about the fraud.
So, keying off of that, what are some of the different schemes that you all have seen being perpetrated on seniors? What are the most kind of popular or the most common schemes?
So, a big common one is the romance scams you hear of. Like Don was saying, a lot of seniors are sometimes are isolated and they're lonely and they're looking for someone to connect with. And these, what we call romance scammers, seek out these individuals, usually online through like Facebook or another platform. It doesn't have to be Facebook, but social media or website, and they kind of groom them in a way. They make connections with them. They try to, they learn a lot about the person. So they seem very interested in the person. So then the individual, the elder is like, oh, well, this is someone who cares about me. They're interested in my life and they want to spend time with me. And that's something that I really need and want in my life, obviously. So then these scammers will use this relationship they've built, relationship I put in quotes, with the individual to get them to send them money. There'll come a point where they've groomed the person enough where they'll point blank ask the person to send them money for various reasons. It might be, I need some money to fix my house, or like, if you send me money, I'll come visit you. Or we've seen that scam. We've also seen where they're like, look how successful I am. I'll show you how I invested my money. Use my website, my platform, but it's really a fake website. It's a fake link. And, that's really hard when someone is thinking with their heart and not their head, because they've developed a relationship with this person. And so that's just really hard. And that's one that we're seeing more and more as people are spending more time online. They're developing what they think are relationships with individuals. And so it's just something that you need to be aware of. another one we really see, and it's very common in Alaska, is affinity fraud. And this is it sounds like a technical word, but it's where an individual again uses trust, just like in the relationship scam, is they work their way into a specific group of people, and that's the affinity. Like, these people are all related to a specific thing. It could be a church community, is very common. It could be an ethnic community. It could be a professional organization. It could be like a veterans community. And so this individual will embed themselves in this community, and and gain the trust of the individuals. And so the people think, this is someone who shares the same values as me. Why would I not just trust their word on something? We see this a lot with friends and family, like we said, church communities, and it's almost like and these scammers are likable. People like them. They think that
Hmm.
they're their friends. They think that they have the same values in their church, in their ethnic community, their professional organization. And so these are heartbreaking for them, because they trust this person. This person came to their son's graduation. This person, they've watched their kids grow up together. And how could they take advantage of them? And like, the largest case our office worked involved affinity fraud. It was a $26 million scam in Alaska called Tycoon Trading. And it was perpetrated on young individuals, but a lot of elderly individuals as well. And this person took advantage of people, and they didn't even question him because he was the son of a family they grew up with, a well-respected family in the community. And
And how many people exactly? I don't remember the number on how many victims there were.
I believe
It's
it
like a
was
hundred and something.
140 victims and 38 elderly Alaskans, which is, very, very sad. People that are like a widow. At her funeral, this guy came to the funeral and was speaking with her and said, like, I can invest your funds for you. And people said, they took advantage of my trust. And to your point, they were embarrassed. Some of them are
Yes.
still embarrassed to talk about it because they can't even believe that they didn't question stuff, that
Right.
they basically just handed their money over. So I would say this one is very common in Alaska. People in Alaska are trusting. The
Yes.
communities are small. People invest in their friends' businesses all the time because their mom said it was a good idea. Their brother said it's a good idea. So we just implore people to ask questions, talk to people they trust, because this is something we see a lot in Alaska. And then another one is one that you guys also touched on, is the guardian and caregiver and trusted loved one cases that we see. And these are probably the most difficult because people don't want to believe. Who wants to believe someone that is supposed to be close to them, someone that is supposed to care for them, is taking advantage of them? And so sometimes they don't want to believe their victims, which Dawn mentioned. I think Pat and Marty, you also mentioned, they don't want to come to terms with that. And so that's just a very delicate balance, where we have to work with adult protective services or other agencies within our state and try to help them in ways, to make them realize and maybe help them find other individuals that can help them through these situations. But these are the ones where we get reports of, the son came in and he's at the bank with the individual and he won't leave his dad's side, and we don't know like why he needs the money now, and he's feeling a lot of pressure, and we think something is up, and so we will get a report of that. And then a couple more I just wanted to touch on are the alternative investment ones, and these kind of go with the romance scams, or sometimes the affinity fraud, in that these people will say, I have this new investment you can make a ton of money on, and so it could be like crypto digital assets, and which, you can invest in crypto, but like it's very risky. Also, there's things like precious metals. We had a case in Alaska and throughout the US where elderly conservatives were highly targeted with this case because the fraudsters said, hey, you want to hedge against inflation. You want to, you know, have value in something that doesn't move a bunch like the stock market is. So you should liquidate your retirement and put it in these precious metals. And so they're very targeted with their pitch towards people, the elderly. And it was very sad because a lot of individuals did liquidate their retirement and sometimes were left with nothing because then the precious metals weren't actually worth what these fraudsters were actually saying they were worth. So I guess the theme throughout all of these is that the fraudsters really are typically likable people that use trust and relationships, something that everybody craves, and especially elderlies as they get older and their kids are older and don't need them as much. These are things that they want. They want that connection, and these fraudsters and scammers know that and use that to their advantage. So you should never feel embarrassed to speak out against these things because these fraudsters know what they're doing, and it's really sad that they take advantage of the things that are most near and dear to us.
And when you don't speak out, it just enables them to do it to other people, right?
Yeah, that's especially like in the affinity fraud, they will go until they can't go anymore. They just keep bringing in money and they use people's trust and word of mouth. They will just continue until someone or something makes them stop.
Ugh. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
And I think you gave some really good examples of that affinity fraud and the different groups that might be available for seniors to be part of and feel comfortable with those people and trust them. It can also happen, as you mentioned, a caregiver. I've seen it happen with people coming to the senior center with someone and paying attention to that person consistently. I've seen that happen more than once. So it can be very in front of us, but we have to be able to recognize it. And so, what can family and friends and caregivers do to recognize that and then to help?
I have some ideas, and then I'm sure Dawn has some ideas as well. Some of the things we call them kind of red flags to look for. And so you have the things that are true for anyone. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If someone says, there's no risk, you're going to get positive returns forever. This is, a can't miss opportunity. Those are all things that should give you a little bit of pause. I recommend that you have someone that you trust outside. We call it a trusted contact in the work we do. So, like your banking institution or your brokerage firm will say, do you have a trusted contact? It doesn't have to be a family member, it could be an attorney, it could be an accountant, it could be a friend, and they don't have control over your accounts. But there's someone that the institution can call and say, something's off. Can you check on this individual because this isn't their typical behavior, or they're asking to wire a large sum of money and this doesn't seem like something they would typically would do. So that's something that you can do at any age, but especially I think important in elderly to have someone they trust to put down there, but also have someone that you can call and discuss something with. I don't know how many times I've worked a case that people say, if I just taken a moment and said it out loud, I would have realized that it couldn't possibly be true. And so never feel pressured to make a decision right then. Always ask for documents that you can review with someone else. This is your hard earned money that you've worked your whole life for, and have someone that you can talk out. Like, I got a call that they said these things to me, and does this make sense to you? And that's another thing. Be very wary of unsolicited phone calls. People don't just call you and ask you for personal information. Your bank, the IRS, the FBI is not going to call and ask you for your social security number, your name, your passwords to your computer.
Yeah, your bank account numbers, your
Yeah.
credit card number. Yeah. No financial institution is going to do that.
There is a do not call number, and maybe we can give you the link and the phone number for that, and you can get your number on that list so you don't get telemarketer calls, and people aren't allowed to call you. So those are my big tips. And empower yourself and use your resources. The internet, although it's very scary for many things, also is a wonderful tool. Like Google, people look up names. People are supposed to be registered if they're offering investments. Also, people have Googled names after they gave money to someone, and they're like, oh, this person scammed all these people. Like, I wish I'd looked them up. So those are some of my biggest tips. And Dawn, I'm sure you have other things to add on as well.
Well, considering that only 28% of these crimes are committed by strangers, we really do have to have that uncomfortable conversation to say that it's most likely family, friends, or caregivers, which I know is a hard one to swallow, because we want to think that everybody has their loved one's best interest at heart, but it's the responsibility of the whole entire state of Alaska, every citizen, to help to prevent these types of crimes. If you have a friend, a neighbor, or someone that you go to the same organization or activities with, don't be afraid to say, hey, I heard this really interesting conversation on a podcast the other day about elder fraud, and I just want to make sure you're okay. What's the worst they're going to say? That's none of your business. But the thing they may say is, gosh, I really don't know. And so that opens up that uncomfortable conversation with our elders and brings to light things that their generation just isn't familiar with, for the most part. Again, as we talked about independence for our seniors, it's very important. If you are a loved one of an individual, and let's say you are on their accounts and you see something happening, bring it to their attention and ask them if they see something suspicious on their bank statement. That really, again, just brings that independence back to them. They have ownership of it, and they also have the power to do something about it.
Wow. Oh, this has given me the heebie-jeebies hearing about this. Well, I know one particular individual, when she gets these telemarketing calls, she doesn't want to hang up. She doesn't want to make them feel bad. So she keeps on talking to them.
Yes.
And we've explained to them several times, they won't feel bad if you hang up on them, because they're going to call somebody else right as soon as you hang up.
Absolutely.
And they are not your friend.
No. Yeah, and that really speaks to the lonely part that Anne brought up earlier is, these people know that the majority of elderly people are lonely, and they will sit there and listen about all your grandchildren and all the things you have going on. And again, like Anne had mentioned, earn your trust. And that's when they know they can get you.
Right.
Or the one I keep hearing about, and some of my relatives have certainly had this one about the telephone call to an elderly person when your grandson is in jail and needs the bail money. I think that's probably one of the most common fraudulent cases.
I think you're right, and there's a way to counter that. And so my recommendation is that you tell your grandson that I need to hang up really quickly. I'm so sorry. I'll call you right back. Just give me a minute. And then call your grandchild or your loved one on the cell phone or the landline that you have on record that is supposed to belong to them. And I feel like that is that is a great way to fight back. And that's something that everybody can remember to do.
I had a friend that his mom was walking to the bank because her son was supposedly in jail and they were trying to get money. And a neighbor happened to be walking by, saw her, and asked what was going on. And that neighbor called her son, and her son said, "No, I'm sitting here at my office. I'm fine." And fortunately, that neighbor caught her as she was walking to the bank, and she
Right.
didn't get there. So,
and that is citizens taking ownership over our vulnerable citizens, and that is to be commended for sure.
yeah, it's everybody's responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to look after your neighbor.
Yes.
It is. And there are also groups, and I've had these calls of different organizations calling to get a donation that have been fraudulent, and
Absolutely.
recognize that they're kind of creepy.
Well, and they're very creative. I mean, when we hear of frauds, I'm sure Anne thinks the same thing I do. Like, wow, I never would have thought of that, which is
Right.
sad.
Because
Right.
I've had one, a police organization calling and wanting a donation, and it was completely fraudulent, and calling myself. So there are these people out there who have no scruples and will do anything to get what they need financially.
So what should our elders be looking for? What are the red flags that would make them go, "Hey, wait a minute. What should they look for?"
Well, some of them, like the too good to be true, that kind of stuff. But, with like specifically romance scams, big red flags are, I want a long distance relationship, I can't actually come see you. And they have a bunch of excuses as to why they can't come see you. And they kind of are like, "Oh, I'm too busy," or "I don't have enough money," or, they're always making an excuse for why they can't actually meet you in person, or they're like, "I can't be on video," those kinds of things, because they're obviously not who they say they are. With affinity fraud, I would say the big thing is ask for documents so you can look at them. Because a big red flag is when someone is like, "I don't have documents," or "You don't need to know that. This is a can't miss opportunity," like I was saying a little bit earlier. You want something in writing so you have time to look at it. Um, those are some of the big ones. And just be really cautious of, friendships that develop on social media, or like we said, people that are calling and saying they're your friend and they're listening to you for hours on end. And I know, you know, my parents are of this generation, they answer every phone call. And so my biggest thing is, if you don't recognize a number, don't you don't have to pick it up. It's okay. Or like Dawn and you guys, you were saying, if the person isn't making sense or you're uncomfortable, you can just hang up on someone. It's not, it's not a family member, it's not someone you were expecting a call from. And that's the other thing. Something I didn't bring up already is, people don't call you to ask you, do you want to sell your timeshare? Like, do you want to buy real estate? Like, people don't just call you out of the blue to ask you these things. It's not something that you would expect. So I would just be very cautious and mindful of who you give information to and who you pick up numbers of. And I think, Marty, you and I were speaking a little bit before this started, is now with technology and AI, the artificial intelligence, is they can spoof phone numbers to recognize like your number, right? And they can make their voice sound like someone you care about. So like Dawn had a very good point, like you can say, "I'll call you right back on the number I have for you," if you think it's your grandson. And Ari, I think you said, have a code phrase or a code word so that only someone you care about would know that.
Right. We had that where if this is really who I think it is, then you'll know what we did on the lake in the summer of 72.
Yeah.
And if they don't know the answer to that, then it's not them.
Right.
So, so what can a person or family members do if they find a family member that's a victim or a senior is a victim to fraud? What can someone do?
Do you want me to go first or you want to go first, Don?
No, you go ahead. I
Since
think that topic is all for you.
So, obviously like we've all been talking about, it's really hard to realize you're a victim for a lot of people, especially if it's someone that's supposed to care for you. And so people are embarrassed and they don't report these things, but we implore you to notify someone as soon as you believe that you might be a victim. Because if you're wiring money, sometimes, and now with modern technology, stuff happens so simultaneously, but there are times I've seen where institutions have been able to stop payments, or like we have tools in place in our laws where we can delay disbursements and allow us time to investigate if something is illegitimate, and therefore protecting our seniors and elderly from a fraud. So contact us. I will also say that on the front end is always better, so call someone you trust and they can contact us and say, hey, someone pitched me this investment, or someone's saying they need this money for this. Does this make sense? Are they registered to do this? Have you heard of this business? We've gotten cases that we've investigated because of this, where people have called and said, hey, I got a call to do this. Does that make any sense? Like, do you guys know of this business? And like I was saying before, Alaska is small. We work with a lot of other state agencies and federal agencies. So if it doesn't fall within the category we oversee, we would contact maybe consumer protection. We'll contact Adult Protective Services if we need assistance with something. This is a multidisciplinary approach to helping our elders and seniors be safe, because there's so many different areas. Like we've said, these scammers are very creative, and it requires cross-agency help on these. I also would say that if you believe your bank account or something like that has been compromised, let's say you gave your information over the phone, or you allowed someone to remote in that said they were a bank employee, like contact that place immediately, change your passwords immediately, and get some people to help you with that technical side of things so they can put safeguards in place to secure your accounts. The sooner you can tell people that you've potentially been a victim, the better, because then some things can take place to help assist you and to prevent you from being a future victim. Because a lot of these, especially these unsolicited phone calls, it's like you get on a list. We've seen elderly get on a list and then they get a lot of phone calls. They're somehow on a list, especially if they've given money or seemed open to giving money, that they end up on some sort of list where everybody seems to be calling them. And that's just a really scary and sad,
Well,
sad
they
thought. And
also,
so,
receive text messages, as well.
oh,
So,
yeah.
I know that a familiar one to me is, you get a text from FedEx saying, I want to deliver this package for you, but I need an additional $25. And you give the $25. And, so just be really, really careful with those, and think to yourself, am I expecting a package from FedEx? Or ask family members, have you sent me something?
I think what's really important here is that there is continued education for families and the elderly, and especially for providers of senior services, to give information out in a regular way so people can be reminded of the changes that are there, the new fraudulent tactics that might be used. I'm looking at the AARP bulletin for this month, and it's all about fraud and some really good pieces of information in there. But I think with providers having that information, continuing to give it to the public as a whole is really important, and providers need to realize that by state law, they have to report what they see and hear and might think of someone being a victim.
And it's also really, really important what you guys said is that point of if you're questioning this at all, call a relative or call a trusted friend and say, hey, somebody just called me up and made me this incredible offer. What do you think? And maybe your kids can then go look it up and they can search for it and go, oh, yeah, that's a common scam. Stay away from that one.
May I share a very recent scam that I've discovered?
Please do.
So as I said, my precious parents live with my family and I, so I feel like I have a front row seat to lots of different examples, unfortunately. My parents were purchasing a puppy, a smaller puppy that they can take care of. And so they were looking online and they came across a website for these puppies, and the price was half the cost of the other organizations. But we were having a hard time. They couldn't get their PayPal to work. And so they sent $25 just a test to see if their PayPal would work. And it did. But then I was struggling with the rest of, paying the balance of it, thankfully. And so I just, within 5 minutes, I was able to get online, determine that the IP address for their website is in South Africa, realizing that they say they're in one town in California, but their phone is from a different town in California. And then they actually their mailing address is in a different town in California. So, they're very creative, but, I have to say the internet really is very helpful in situations like this because you can look at their IP address very easily. So yeah, it was a new one. I hadn't heard that one before, but I'm not surprised.
Everybody loves puppies. And they love cheap puppies. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Wow.
Puppies are expensive now.
They are.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, do you have any last words that you would like to kind of end with here?
Empower yourself. Like, we want to help elderly continue to be independent. You can call our office if you have questions, call a trusted person if you have questions about someone. Never feel pressured, and to Dawn's point, use your resources. The internet is an amazing tool for looking up things and confirming facts and details. And just know that if you have become a victim, that there are agencies out there that are trying to help you and trying to safeguard you, and that the sooner that you get them involved, the sooner that they can help you and prevent future issues for you. Yes, empower yourself. And I think Pat said it, like, educate yourself. There are a lot of resources. I will say, like, NASA, the North American Securities Administrators Association, has a Serve Our Seniors website. A lot of these organizations have specific senior and elder initiatives, and so it's just getting that information out to help people. So those are my parting words. And shows like this allow a broader reach to individuals, and we need to be reminded of all these different things because scams are ever evolving. Like Dawn said, they think of everything that preys on things that we want and need and desire. So those are my last words, and Dawn, I'll let you add on to that.
Thank you, Anne, and I really appreciate your expertise. I really do. Having somebody as experienced as you and knowledgeable as you and your team, I know that you all have helped to save many, many individuals from fraud. So thank you for that. I think for me, if you suspect fraud, call your financial institution immediately, notify your family. If it's physical property that has been stolen, contact law enforcement. Like Anne said, there are a lot of helpful divisions within the state of Alaska. We have the Office of Elder Fraud Assistance. Of course, there's the State of Alaska Office of Senior and Disability Services. And then, of course, your group, the Alaska Commission on Aging, and then our division. And we are actually in the process of developing a page specifically geared towards fraud. And we will have lots of resources on there, a lot of helpful tips, things like that we can provide. And so I think that again, to reiterate what Pat said, is educate yourself.
Is there a number that they should call?
Yes. So the Office of Elder Fraud and Assistance, their phone number is 907 334 5954. And if you didn't get that number, just get onto the internet and look up Office of Elder Fraud Alaska, and it'll bring you right there.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I have certainly learned a lot, and I'm always shocked and appalled at how heartless and ruthless these scammers can be.
Well, on behalf of our director, Robert Schmidt, and the division, we wanted to just let you know how much we appreciate the opportunity to share this information.
So now it's time for Pat's Points. Pat has been working on behalf of Alaska seniors for more than 35 years, and in that time, she has gained a lot of knowledge and wisdom. So, Pat, this was a very interesting interview. Give us your high points on this, please.
Well, I think the high points for me as a provider and as an individual who's a senior as well are the numbers of scams that go on, how it affects seniors with the highest suicide rate of all ages, and the shame involved. And this is what I think really bothers me, and I certainly have seen this, are family members who do fraudulent activities with their loved ones. That to me is something that you don't think about. As both of our interviewees said, people that you trust, they use that trust, become likable. It doesn't matter what kind of group you're in, whether it's an ethnic group or a church group or whatever. There are people out there who are attracted to these groups for certain reasons. In fact, I had a scam call yesterday. It was on the landline, which we don't use very often, and was from a so-called Life Med group, which we are members of, because if you have to be, and my husband has had to be flown out of Kodiak in a Life Med plane, and the call was about my renewal, our renewal. And I said, no, I've renewed that online, and I hung up. So it wasn't Life Med who was calling me. It was someone else, some other agency. It wasn't a Life Med phone number. And they were trying to get information to so-called renew our Life Med membership.
Wow. I get these texts from random numbers I don't know. And I got one about 3 days ago, and it said, quote, "Are you free tomorrow? Let's have dinner together and discuss it in detail." Now, that was a number that I didn't recognize, and it wasn't a 907 number, so I knew it wasn't somebody I knew in Alaska. And what they're doing there is they're just trying to get you to respond to say, who is this? So they can start a conversation and ease into the beginning of a scam.
Right. And the older population likes to answer their phone.
They do.
Whether it's landline or mobile, because there's a social contact going on there, possibly. And this is the advice I gave my mother, who lived independently until she was 97, is that if you don't recognize the number, don't answer. Just don't answer. I know you're lured into doing that, but you don't have to do that. So
exactly.
If you don't recognize the number, then don't. And
right.
With Life Med, I saw Life Med on the landline as an ID, and then I picked up the phone and gave her the information that no, I'm renewed, and I checked my Life Med card membership, and sure enough. But sometimes when you answer the phone and just say, and they ask, "Is this Pat Branson or Marty Lang?" and you say yes, they take that and go from there.
Right. Yep.
And you were also mentioning, Marty, the new AI technologies that are available out there to get into a scam situation as well.
Right. Yeah. What they can do is if they can get a little bit of a recording of your voice, they can create an artificial voice box that sounds just like you up to about 90%. And so this is the reason why earlier in the show we talked about creating some sort of code word for your family, because with AI being able to recreate your voice and then feeding a script through that, they can make you say anything. And so it's good to have some sort of code phrase that your family's agreed upon that helps you know if it's really your family member who's talking to you on the phone. For example, you could make an agreement with your family that if you ask the question, "What did we have for dinner last night?" that they would always answer something you decided in advance, like roast caribou or moose burgers, something unique that only your family would say, something that an AI would never be able to guess, so that if you hear something that sounds a little suspicious, you can ask that question to your family member or whoever's on the phone. And if they don't know the answer, you know it's not them.
There was one line that you gave at the end about having your eyes open to what's going on. And, you know, when you see some fraudulent behavior, especially with family members being fraudulent with their loved one, you might be suspicious, but you need to also see a pattern of what's going on and then report it, because your antenna might be up. You might not want to believe a scam is going on or a fraudulent situation. But from my perspective, what I've seen, most of the fraudulent cases involve family members, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Pat, for sharing your insights and your wisdom. Now, this is for all our listeners. If you have gotten scammed, or if someone has made you an offer that sounds too good to be true, and you want to see if it's real or not, please, please, please call the Alaska Fraud Hotline that was given earlier. That number for the Alaska Fraud Hotline is 907 334 5954. 907 334 5954. And if it's a fraud, they probably know about it. And if you've already been taken, they'll be able to tell you what to do. Also, I just want to note, for more information about what we talked about on this show, we've got everything in our show notes. All you have to do is go to alaskawisdom.com. alaskawisdom.com. Alaska Wisdom and Wellness is a production of the Alaska Commission on Aging. Our theme music, High Clover, was provided by Audio Hero and downloaded from www.videvo.net. Today's program was edited by yours truly, Marty Lang, who is also your host, along with Pat Branson. Thanks for listening.